G'day mate, 40 here. We have shared so much on this channel, but I don't think I've shared with you how important 8th grade was in my life. So 8th grade was super important because it was a very important time for my father. So 8th grade for me began in September of 1979, ended in June of 1980. And in October of 1979, my father delivered a controversial speech one Sabbath afternoon. I think it was on the day of Yom Kippur, which is not a Seventh-day Adventist holiday, but it was about the investigative judgment in Seventh-day Adventism and led to him being dismissed from the church, Seventh-day Adventist church ministry in a major conference, the Glacier View Conference in the summer of 1980. But he was called back to Washington, D.C. in November, December of 1979. I got to stay behind and finish 8th grade. So it was the closest to normality that I'd yet achieved. It was a really happy time. So when I got away from home, I was just much happier and much more socially effective. And it's when I started listening to pop music, and it was the first time I had access to a TV, so I became conversant with her, and so I had more in common with my classmates with both the pop music and the pop culture. And I could hang out after school with my classmates, and I wasn't feeling continually embarrassed by my parents. And by 8th grade, I had decided on my chosen path through life. I was going to become a journalist. So I had that clarity. And I was quite well read. And did I ever tell you what a gamer I was? I invented all these games. I loved strategy games. I used to play a lot of board games, strategy games. I loved world domination, war, games like Risk. And so I developed a game where you could be the president of the United States, and there were these variables such as pollution, and you'd have to decide how much money you would spend on controlling pollution, how heavily you would regulate pollution at the cost of economic growth. So there'd be trade-offs, how much of a budget deficit or no budget deficit at all you wanted to run, how much government expenditure you wanted, how strong a military, what kind of tax rates. So it was a card game with dice, and you'd make choices about the national budget. And I was hyper well read for a kid and very interested in politics. So because I read a lot, most of the people who wrote were on the left. And so prior to Ronald Reagan taking office January 20th of 1981, I was more favorably disposed towards Jimmy Carter and the Democrats. I'm not sure I had a coherent political philosophy until Ronald Reagan's first term. So I spent 9th grade, which began in September of 1980, went until June of 1981 at Forest Lake Christian School. So that was the first non-Seventh-day Adventist school I attended. It was an evangelical Christian school, and they subscribed to publications from the John Birch Society, and they also subscribed to U.S. News and World Report. And they were a feeder program to Bob Jones University, which forbade interracial dating. And so pretty much everyone was on the right. And among my best friends in 9th grade was Lane Van Houde, whose dad was Ronald Reagan's personal artist. So it was quite a right-wing school in American political terms. It was the age of the moral majority. And so 9th grade was when I began my first political philosophy. But I'm thinking a great deal about politics, political strategy, international relations. And I was more favorably disposed to Jimmy Carter than Ronald Reagan. In fact, I even lost $8. I bet I think Lane was a classmate or was a year ahead of me, that I bet him $5 that Jimmy Carter would defeat Ronald Reagan in the election. And I was so shocked on election day, just driving around during grocery shopping with my stepmother, and by 4:30 p.m. right on election day, we knew, and it was being announced on the news, that Ronald Reagan had won this overwhelming victory and that the Republicans had taken control of the U.S. Senate for the first time in decades by like 4:30 in the afternoon, right? So with Trump, we pretty clearly knew by 9 p.m. that he was cruising to a presidential victory. But on Ronald Reagan's victory, we knew before 5 p.m. that Ronald Reagan had the election all wrapped up. So I lost $5 because I'd bet on Jimmy Carter. And then my exposure to John Birch Society publications and U.S. News and World Report, and being around a lot of right-wing evangelical Christians who are much more political than the Seventh-day Adventists that I'd been around previously, that's when I developed my right-wing conservative political philosophy. It was the first time I had a coherent political philosophy. But prior to that, I was still very interested in power international relations, and I was defending Jimmy Carter to this bloke. He was like a big brother to me. Like I stayed with his mother and him while my parents went to Washington, D.C. He was about 8 years older than me. And I designed this baseball game that you'd play with cards and different players. And I developed all these rules. And we played a World Series, like a seven game World Series or whatever. It's just very exciting. And I also designed like a football game that I play with my classmates, because it was like a 2-hour bus ride to school and 2-hour bus ride from school every day. And so I was quite the gamer. And I was really into geopolitics. And so my older friend, this big brother bloke, Glenn, I was waxing to him about all the great things that Jimmy Carter had done. And I said, well, look at Camp David. He said, Camp David, that simply means that the United States bribed Egypt and Jordan to make peace with Israel. I was quite disillusioned by that argument. I'd never heard of that argument in the news media. That was never brought up in the news. I was going to be a journalist. I was following journalism closely, and journalism had never presented that perspective to me. It was quite shocking. I was just a young lad, and I was being exposed to the brutal world of geopolitical John Mearsheimer style realism. And it's still quite shocking to hear in the year 2025 that the United States bribed Egypt and Jordan to make peace with Israel, and that was what the Camp David Accords were largely about. You don't hear that perspective in the mainstream news media. Does it not take you aback? Is it not a bracing and shocking idea or concept? Or perhaps you're just so blasé about our institutions and the mainstream media that it doesn't shock you at all. It's like 40 what else is new. But I still find that kind of shocking perspective, right? Is that really what the Camp David Accords were all about? The United States is bribing Jordan and Egypt, not just a one-time basis in 1979, but on an ongoing basis. We're sending billions of dollars to Egypt and Jordan not to go to war with Israel. And the reason I'm thinking about this is that Egypt has moved a bunch of military forces close to Israel, close to Gaza, and they say, we're just doing this to keep the Palestinians in Gaza. We don't want them infiltrating our society. We don't want the Muslim Brotherhood setting off terror attacks. But it's clear that Donald Trump's Gaza policy has damaged America's relationship with Egypt, that Egypt's dictator Sisi is not going to visit the United States, not going to meet with Donald Trump due to Trump's Gaza plan. And what the hell? There's absolutely no way that Egypt is going to launch a war against Israel, right? That's completely inconceivable, right? There's no way, right, that Egypt is going to go to war with Israel. Here I am making content. Oh, fuck. Sorry. I apologize for my bad language. Making content out of nothing at all. Bro, I'm opening up. My name is Luke Ford. I come from the land down under. Litterbugs. Was your stepmother stuck in the grocery store? I don't remember. What brings Luke Ford out? I had ideas that I wanted to share with you, bro. Like there's a special quality to my thinking when I walk and talk, right? There's a special quality to stroll streams, right? These are going to completely change the direction of moral thinking and geopolitical analysis going forward based on these stroll streams. This is going to completely transform the nature of live streaming, right? You think differently when you're walking as opposed to when you're just standing fairly stationary at your desk, playing clips of other people. Art Belt, I never ignore you, bro. You're in my heart. You're in my soul. You make me happy as I grow old. Art Belt, it was you who encouraged me to apply for monetization for this channel. Every dollar that I earn from this channel, I owe you 50 cents. Is this the Middle East era of Luke's anal analysis? 10 watching. Well, those were exciting times. Now we're just down to 4. Homeless vagrants fixate on their mostly legitimate grievances. The footage of decaying LA. But assure me, right, there's absolutely no way, right, that Egypt goes to war with Israel. I just can't conceive this. Israel's got the most powerful military in the Middle East, but now we've got buses blowing up in Israel. They completely halted bus and train transportation in Israel. So are we going to have Intifada 3 in Israel kicking off now? Has Donald Trump's Gaza plan inspired jihadis to go back to committing massive acts of terror against, to begin with, Israel and then Americans all over the world? Right? Are we about to have chaos in the Middle East? So who's that linguist, that cunning linguist, Noam Chomsky? Whenever he was booked to give a talk and asked for a topic, he'd say, the coming crisis in the Middle East, because that was like an evergreen title, because there's always sure to be another coming crisis in the Middle East. But Rabasai, Hevra, my friends, bro, are we about to have some massive war in the Middle East? Is Egypt against all odds, against all rationality, against its financial incentives, about to launch an invasion of Israel? That's unfathomable. It's unthinkable. It's preposterous. It's impossible. There's no way. It makes no empirical sense, right? Egypt depends on billions of dollars of subsidies from the United States. So America spends, how much have we given to Israel, given to Egypt since the Camp David Accord? So I'd say probably an average $3 billion a year in present dollars. So that's like 45 years. That's like $150 billion. So we've given Egypt about $150 billion. I assume we've given Jordan about $50 billion. Like, is that in America's interest to bribe Egypt and Jordan to not go to war with Israel? Are we getting good bang for the buck there? Is Doge going to investigate our foreign aid of bribing Jordan and Egypt, and maybe to some extent Israel, not to go to war with each other? Is that a good use of taxpayer money? There's no way, tell me, there's no way, bro, that Egypt now launches a war against Israel. I just can't see that happening. Israel's got the strongest military in the Middle East. Look how formidable they were against Hezbollah and Iran. That's not going to happen, bro, right? Tell me. Assure me. Hold me now. Bye-bye. So I like this song by, speaking of bye-bye, I like this song by Ariana Grande. Bye-bye. That's all the lyrics I remember. And then there's one other Ariana Grande song that I enjoy. So I just started listening to her oeuvre, to her greatest hits, to various albums. Mark Halperin linked to one of her videos of her just spontaneously performing various tunes from the musical Wicked during an interview. He labeled the video essential viewing. So I thought, wow, if Mark Halperin considers Ariana Grande essential viewing, like who am I to question the musical taste of the great Mark Halperin? He went to Harvard. He's a Harvard man. And so I delved deeply into the oeuvre of Ariana Grande, and it was a disappointment for me. So I am not a sophisticated musical critic. Right, I just know what I like. I'm a simple man with simple tastes. I love God, America, and apple pie. But overall, I found the oeuvre of Ariana Grande quite disappointing. Bye-bye.